He was a rebbe in the Baltimore yeshiva, and he's the shver to my cousin Yosy Yaman.
Uh-huh.
Okay, here we go. We're up to the Heilige Mishnah. Kol midosh sheva mikdash. All the measurings, the measuring cups, and we're referring specifically to the midas yavesh. Now we know there's a machlekes tanoim. How many midas yavesh were there? The Chacham hold there was one yisarin, and there was one chatzi yisarin, and they were both big enough that even if you didn't fill them heaping, you filled them flat. They were the full shear that they needed to be, one yisarin or a half yisarin.
Right.
Then there was Reb Meir Shita, who holds there was a third measuring cup, which was an Isarin, but it was an Isarin that was only full if you filled it heaping. Those were the Shitas about what the Midosh Shal Yavesh were.
Right.
So now our Mishnah tells us, Kol Midosh Mikdash, referring to Midosh Yavesh, Hayu Nigdashos. They were only the right shear if they were heaping.
Right.
So right off the bat, we know that only stems by the one midas yisaron according to Reb Meir. So this Mishnah, right away, the Gemara is going to challenge who is this going according to. Kol midas shebemikdash hayu nigdashos chutz mishal kayin, except for the kayin gadol shaya goy shalasaycha. The yisaron of the kayin,
Big enough.
Even if you filled it completely without heaping it, it would be a full shear. Midas halach. What about the midas, the measuring cups that held liquids? Birut tzayin kadosh. Even the area above the surface of the keli that would spill over when you move it, they also have a kedusha, like a klisharis. I'm sorry, not a klisharis. They will have the kedusha of the yain. They become kadosh. Umidas hayovesh.
Before it spills. In other words, if it holds more,
even after it spills.
Yeah, after it spills, is not because it was kaddish already.
How was it kaddish if it wasn't inside the keli? So we're going to get to that.
Yeah, all right.
Umidas hayovesh should be saying chayil. Midas hayovesh, if you overfill them and they were heaping, whatever is sticking out is chayil. Rabbi Kiva says, Midas halach is kadosh. The Midas halach, all of the measuring cups that measured liquids, they were klei shares. They were nimshach with the shem and amishcha, and they were klei shares. So therefore, lefichach b'yiraitzein kadosh. Therefore, anything that's in them or even above them is kadosh because they're in a keli of kedusha. But Midas hayavesh chayil. The whole keli is not even a klisharis. Lefichach b'yiraitzein chayil. So the obvious question is, even what's inside them will be chayil because they're not a klisharis. Zogt Rashi, v'chayil lefichach mashe b'fnim b'chli kedushas pehu dimikadesh lei. It's the person when he puts the flour in, he's being makdashit. It's like saying harezu oila, and that's what's makdashit. What he needs to be part of the shear that his chayvus obliges him to provide, that's what he's being mekadesh. But birutzin, the heaping that's not part of the shear, the loitzarech loy mekadesh. Lefichach birutzein chayil.
Does he have to actually say it, or it's keilu?
I assume it's keilu. I assume it's keilu. Rabbi Yosef Omer, loy mishum zeh. That's not the reason. The reason is much simpler. Ela shalach neker vayovesh eni naker. If you're filling up a kos, everything you pour and goes straight to the bottom, it mixes up. So even once everything settles down, there'll be an area that sticks up over the kos, the surface tension, that wasn't always there. At one point, when you poured it in, it went down to the bottom. When you're filling something up with flour, the part that's heaping was never, ever inside the keli. So we have a three-way machlokes that the Gemara is going to clarify. But first, let's go back to the first line in the Mishnah. Kol midos shebemikdash hayu nigdashos chutz mishal kain gadol. which doesn't stem with what we learned. So frekt Gemara Mani. Irab Meir. If you're going into Reb Meir, there were three kalim, one of a half Yisarin and one of a Yisarin, that were both the exact size, not Kodesh. Then there was a second Yisarin that was only a Yisarin if it was heaped. So Reb Meir, Chad Kodesh Hava, not all the kalim, only one of the kalim were Kodesh.
So
And Rabbanon,
it was equal to the heap, to the other kli with being with heap, in other words.
Correct. But there was only one of them like that.
Yeah.
And Rabbanon, Chada, there was only one Yisarin. Umachagava, and it was big enough to hold the Yisarin, even if it wasn't heaping. So what does it mean? All the kalim that measured dry, the measurement was only if it was heaping. That doesn't stem according to Reb Meir, and it surely doesn't stem according to the Chachamim. It's going according to Reb Meir, and we're only talking about that one keli, that one Yisarin that you have to overfill in order for it to be a full Yisarin. Umay kol midos kol medidos. It doesn't mean every keli, every measuring keli, because avada that's not true. Dafka that measuring keli, that in order to have the full Yisarin that had to be heaping, any time you measured with that keli, you had to make sure that it was heaping, otherwise you wouldn't have the full shear. So it's not midos, it's medidos. Anytime you measured, if you wanted it to be a full Yisarin, you had to have it heaping. Zogt the Heilige Gemara weiter. Midas halach biru tzayin kodesh. Now, there happens to be a lot of raid. What does biru tzayin mean? I touched anything that's within the surface tension. But there are those who learn it's only referring to that spills over the side. The stuff that's on the top is considered mamish inside. So there's a lot of discussion about it. So what exactly, we have a three-way machloikis between the Tanakama, Rabbi Kiva, and Rabbi Yosy. What klor is the machloikis? Zokt Gemara, Tanakama Sova.
What's Spirit saying if not, it only happens once it spills, there's no berutzim.
The kasha is that yayin that spilled over, is it kodesh or not?
But if that's not Birut saying, what is Birut saying then?
The question is Birut saying only what spills over, but not what's on top in the middle, or everything on top.
I'm saying it happens many times when I make kiddush. You fill it up and you go a little higher, and it doesn't spill over. The capillary action keeps it there, right?
Right. It's called surface tension.
Yeah.
But the question is, well, let's say you give a shackle and it spills over.
Right. There's
no That's the question.
Yeah, but once it spills over, there's no maybe roots in the higher. I don't know.
I hear. So that's why I learned the pasha to pshat that it's referring to the entire amount that's above, that's not within the rim of the cuts, because it gets a little complex. So Zog to Gemara, Tanakama Sover Midas Halach Nimshecha Bein Mi Befnim Bein Mi Bechutz. The kalim that were made to measure liquids, they were moishach the Mishem and Mishcha say on the inside surface and the outside surface. So even if wine spills over on the outside surface and never was in the keli, it becomes kadosh because it came in contact with the outside of the keli. And that's why I was talking about what spilled over, because when it spills over and it runs down the side of the keli,
that makes
that's when it could be mekadosh.
Doesn't have to have a toich?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't have to have a toich?
Weislich not. Midas Yavesh, Nimshach mi befnim, v'loy nimshach mi b'chutz. So there's a couple of chedushim here. One chedush is, even when you made the Mashiach, it was kind of chav yavanis. You didn't smear the whole thing. Yet if you made a chav yavanis, it only was on the inside of the keli, but not for the outside of the keli. I thought it made the whole keli into klisharis. We're splitting the keli enough. But I think that in and of itself is a chiddush that's noteworthy.
What did they were nimshach on the outside also?
What?
They were moishach on the outside also?
That was the shaila. So the Tanakama holds that the Midas Halach, they were moishach on the outside of the keli. And the Midas Yovesh, they were only moishach on the inside of the keli. Chaim, what are you asking? I hear. I mean, it spills and it doesn't touch anything. I don't know. Yeah. Rabbi Kiva Savar, Rabbi Kiva holds Midas Halach Nimshecha Bein Mi Befnim Bein Mi Bechutz and Midas Yovesh LeNimshecha Kolikar. So that explains Rabbi Kiva's shita, as he says, why is Midas Halach Kodesh and not Midas Yovesh? Because Midas Halach was Nimshach and Midas Yovesh wasn't. Rabbi Yosy Sover, Idi v'idi nimshcha mi b'fnim v'lo nimshcha mi b'chutz. Side the midas halach and side the midas hayovesh is only kodesh mi b'fnim. V'hach hainu taima, what's the difference between lach and yovesh? The lach neker umikavod monakasi. Lach, even though now it's on top, but it was up once upon a time inside. Yovesh ain't a neker. And how does the stuff on the inside become kodesh? That would be with the klisharis, and according to Rabbi Kiva, it would be with the pet, the kedushas pet. But frank the Gemara, according to Rabbi Yosy, v'chineker ma'hava. Let's think about this for a moment. He needs a certain share of wine. Doesn't need more than that. Now, the excess that spills over, Zok Rabbi Yosy, that takes on the kedushas aguf from the klisharis. Why? Gavra. The person never had in mind to be makdish more wine than was necessary, or more oil than was necessary. So Zolzaina wasn't the klisharis, but the klisharis won't be makdish it if he didn't have kavana to bring it as part of his carbon. Amar Avdimi Barsis no Mishmei de Rav Zoyse Meres. You see from here a gechidish that klisharis mekachin shaloi midas. The klisharis is mekadosh whatever's in it, whether or not the person had das to be makdash or not. So Mamela, yes, it all becomes kodesh, even to be rutzin, even if he didn't need it, because once it goes into a klisharis, it gets kedusha. And the way I understand it is it gets kedusha saguf, right? Once it goes into a keli, it's possible lina, it's possible yaitse, which is going to cause a little bit of a problem. Ravina Amar lo oila mei malach ever should come with the anzusagen that klisharis ain't mekachin elamidas. Oy bazoi, it's going to be shver. Why are the birutze lach kadosh if the bailam didn't want to be makdish more than necessary? Ugzeira shemayoyru moitziin michlisharis lachoil. Imagine people see that they poured wine into klisharis, and then some of the wine is taken away and is used at kiddush next week. They'll say, "Oh, vice the klisharis is not mekadosh. It could come out a big kilkel from that. So therefore, anything that went into the klisharis, even if he didn't have in mind to be makashit, we treat it as if it has kedusha saguf." Frank Reb Zera, Moshe Reb Zera. I'm going to bring you a raya that we're not worried what people are going to think or misinterpret what they see in the Beis Hamikdash, because we know the way the lechem aponim was processed was they brought in the new lechem aponim on Shabbos, and it stayed a whole week, and the next Shabbos they took it away, which means the lechem aponim was on the shulchan 8 days, and after it was exposed for 2 Shabboses to the shulchan, that's when the bazichen were hukrav on the mizbeach, the levoy, not the bazichen, the levoy was hukrav on the mizbeach, and the kohanim made it. But what would happen if Siddur is halechem v'sabazichen lachar Shabbos? They did it after Shabbos. So the next coming Shabbos, the new lechem upon them and the new levoina did not see 2 Shabboses. V'hikter sabazichen v'Shabbos wrongfully psula. So Kate said Yasa, what are you supposed to do? They made a mistake. They only put the lechem upon them on Sunday. What do we do? So next Shabbos, there's not going to be lechem upon them. Next Shabbos, there's not going to be Bezichel Levanya that they're going to be Makar on the Mizbeach. Rather, Yanichenu Shabbos Haba. Let it sit there from Sunday till the next Shabbos, which is like 7 and that's like 13 days. Why won't it become Posel Belina after the first Shabbos passes? Shafilu hu ala shulchan yomim rabim ein bechach klum. Now, it's pretty clear from the Rishonim that normally, if you would put the lechem aponim on for the first Shabbos the way you're supposed to, you have to take it off next Shabbos. If you wait till Sunday, it will be compulso belina. Here, the reason why it won't be compulso belina afilu hu ala shulchan yomim rabim is because the shulchan isn't mekadeshit till the first Shabbos. So memela, it will not be compulso belina. Frank the Gemara, even though technically it's not possible, but if people see that you had the lechem aponim stay over Shabbos not removed, they're going to think that as long as anything is in a klisharis, it never will become possible lina. So they might have basar shlomim in a klei and they'll keep it for a week. Why? Because they'll say, I saw in the lechem upon them that if it stays in the klei it never becomes nicer. Hasam nami leimik zera shema yomru mafkidin bechli sharis. You're so concerned that they'll see wine spill over, and if it get used, they'll think that a klisharis is not mekadesh. Well, how will they interpret what they see if the lechem upon him gets left there for too long? They know there's a psolina. They'll assume that a klisharis protects from lina. Zogt gemara upon him achutz karamis. You're telling me that something that they see pouring the wine, they see the measuring of the wine. They don't see what's going on inside the heichel. So panim achutz karamis, panim lav kula al mayadi. Not everybody sees what's going on inside. They see lechem apanim. They don't know what's put on and what's taken off. No one's going to know. So there's no need to be geyser. But chutz kula al mayadi. Everyone sees them measuring, and if they see him taking wine home with him, they'll think that the kalsharis is not mekadosh. Gebaltik. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Tan hasam. If you had extra nosachim, you had extra money from the sachim, what do you do with that money? Or the wine, or the mincha, whatever it is, you sell it, and with that money, lekei tamizbech. We know kei tamizbech means is when you have a slow day, and there's not any extra karbanos that they're makriv in the kind of extra time, and the mizbech is not being filled with meats with karbanos. So they would take this money, they would buy a karbanos oila, and they would be makriv it lekei tamizbech. The basar goes to the mizbech, the or goes to the kahan. Kites is summer.
Kites, it comes from the word summer because my toes get taken to fatten. That comes from the side. That used to be the dessert.
So it's not kites, it's kites.
Kites means dessert.
Okay. 1 second. That's not what the article says.
Kites,
the article says kites.
The word kites of the summer comes from the figs that you dry them out.
Let me have a look and see what he says here. I can't see so good. Does it say kites? Does it say kites?
Last line.
I'm looking. Here says the kites.
Kites, yeah.
The article says the kites.
Comes to the same shirish, yeah.
Literally dried figs which are eaten for dessert, used in a borrowed sense to connote that these offerings are to the altar like sweet delicacies served at dessert, have its main fare of regular offering.
Okay. So Tananos, Moshe Nesachim Laketzam is Mech. My Moshe Nesachim. How do you have a Hechatimtza where you're going to have extra money from the Sachim? Zok to Gemara, it's exactly this. You're filling up a kos and it's spilled over. Now this midrabanon, there's a gzeira that you can't take it home. Or if you hold that klisharis is mekadesh shaloi midas, what do you do with these extras? You sell it, and with the money you buy karbanos avoila. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, there's a different source for these extra funds. Ka'oisas sheninu. Hamakabel olav l'sapek saltois me'arba. Someone made a contract with the Beis HaMikdash for the next season. I'm going to be providing you with silas. The agreed upon price will be for every $20. I'm going to give you 4 pounds of silas. And what happened was, in the meantime, the price of silas went up, and now $20 only buys 3 pounds of silas. The luck is too bad. The vendor loses money, and he has to provide 4 pounds for every $20 given. Of course, I'm making up the weights and the numbers, but I'm giving an example. Now, the question is, and I'm speaking this out B'Shem Rav David Hofstadter, when we want to learn these sugas, he asked, so why would anybody want to make such a deal, to lose money? The teretz is, because he's going to have a big sign in the shop that's going to say, the official supplier of soilas to the Beis HaMikdash, and that'll bring in a lot of customers. The guy must be a good guy. He's official supplier of soilas to the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, what about if it's the other way around? Mishalosh, when they made the deal, every $20 was going to buy 3 pounds. But and the price of flour dropped. So now you might think, the vendor makes extra money. No, not when you're dealing with hektish. Misapik me'arba. He has to give extra. Sheyad hektish al ha'elyoina, yad hektish always gets the upper hand. So zokt Rashi, this extra soilus that will be given because the Beis Hamikdash gave him the money already. So this extra soilus that he's going to be giving the Beis Hamikdash doesn't need. So what are they going to do with it? That's Moshe Nesachim Shein L'Ketzah Mizbeach. They'll sell that with the money. The Beis Hamikdash will buy. The Gizbar will buy karbanos oila. Gewaltig. Tanya Kabasei de Rab Chia Bar Yosef, that one source of Ketzah Mizbeach is Birutei Midos. Tanya Kabasei de Rab Yochanan. I don't think it's a stira. I think there's two different sources of Ketzah Mizbeach. Tanya Kabasei de Rab Chia Bar Yosef Birutei Midos. Halalu Maho Yosef Ben Imi Yeshav Achacher Yakrivu Imoy V'Melonu Yifsalu Belina V'Mlav Mekita Menachos Mizbeach V'Ketzah Mahu Oilois. They're Oilois. Habasol L'Shem Oris L'Kayanim. And Tanya Kabasei Rabbi Yochanan, Hamakabel all of the Sapik Saltish Me'arba, Vomdu Misholish, Mesapik Me'arba, Misholish Vomdu Me'arba, Mesapik Me'arba. Sheyar Hektish Al Yoina, Vizeu Shoshaninu Moshe Nesachim L'Ketzah Mizbeach. So I want to rewind a little bit. Because a Bocher Binyamin bookbinder was a very good trial. Let's go back a second over here. You have There's another carbon that needs a mincha, needs a zachem, use it for that. Now, if you hold Birutei Mudais become Kodesh because Klisharis is Mekadesh, even Shalom Midaitoi, Gavaltik, it's Kedushas Aguf, right? But if it's Kedushas Aguf, how can you now be pointed? So it must be that this is going according to the Shita, who holds the Birutei Mudais is not Kodesh, it's only because of Exera. People are going to think, which means, why is it possible? It's only Midirabban Nasr. Elamai, that's the Exera. How could you be Bekita Mizbech? Because Hey Mamar Vei Mamar Baistais. They said it becomes Kadosh, but Lamaisa they say you can be pointed and you can use it for the Mizbech. Pasha, I think that we're not making a mistake. Because if Mamish has Kedushas Aguf, if Mamish has a Kedushas Aguf, unless there's a mum like a carbon, I don't think you could just decide that that you don't want to use it for that anymore. But if it was only Midrabban, then you could. I don't know if I'm saying good.
It doesn't have. Why does that have to Kedushas Aguf? Could be Kedushas Damim, but the Rabbanan guys are treated
because
like
we know once you put something into a clay sharis, it becomes possible lina, it becomes possible yotze.
Yeah.
And at that point, you can't be pointed. No, you can't be pointed at carbon once it has Kedushas Aguf.
No.
It's got a boom.
So say it's Kedushas Damim and the Chamar guys, you should treat it like Kedushas Aguf. That's all.
That according to the Shita holds that a klisharis is not makdash something shalom midaitoi, and the whole thing is that's exera, right? According to that, but if you hold it to mamish the raisa, I don't think this will work. I don't think so, unless I'm making a mistake. That's what today when we were learning with the oilam, that's what the oilam seemed to have agreed upon.
See, they have for difficulty with this explanation.
Okay. Kol karbonis Kol karbonis atzibur ve'ayachid tu'unin nesachim. Every carbon needs nesachim chutz mit habachar v'ma'isru v'pesach v'achatas v'asham. Except there is one chatos and one asham that needs menachos. So for this we need a chumash because we have to learn the parsha inside. The parsha that tells us that karbonis need to be accompanied by a minchas nesachim, which includes flour, oil, and yayin, is in parsha shalach. So let's learn the parsha because the Gemara is going to be darshaning that parsha thoroughly today. It's Bamidbar Tesvov. It's Bamidbar Tesvov. We're going to start from the beginning. Here we go. It's right before the parsha of Challah. V'yidaber Hashem el Moshe leimor, daber el bnei Yisrael, v'amart aleim, ki savoyu el eretz Moshe v'yiseichem, asher ani noishen lachem, v'asizem isha l'Hashem. This pasuk is what the Gemara is going to darshan heavily to get clarity in which karbonos are mechuyev in these minchas nesachim. V'asizem isha l'Hashem oila, oy zevach, which pashas refers to an oila or a shlomim, zevach is a shlomim. L'fa'alei neder ay b'nedava. It seems like we're talking about a carbon, not a carbon chayva, but a carbon nedava, or a carbon that's brought on Yom Tov. Laso Yisrael Nichoyach Lashem Mina Bakar Oy Mina Tzoyin. Now Mina Bakar Oy Mina Tzoyin seems like it's a little extra because we know what an Oyla and a Zevach, and by Yikra we already learned what type of karbonis you bring for an Oyla or Zevach. So these are all shrouds the Gemara is going to ask. But let's go weiter. The Yikra v'Makav Karboni Lashem Mincha Soilas Yisar in Bolol B'Revis Ein Shaman the Yain LeNesach Revis Ein Tasar LaOyla Oyla Zevach LaKeves Ha'echad. Now the Torah goes through each type of animal. And then for a bakar even more. We learned about the different amount of minchas nesachim that needs to be brought for the three carbonis, right? We even learned what if you mix up one with the other, because we learned that there's a much looser belila, there's more oil to wine, there's more oil to flour ratio by a keves than there is by an island of par. By an island of par, it's the same ratio. V'yayin tackle of netzach hatzein isha rech nechach l'shem. Kochios l'shor echad, l'ayla echad, oila sebak, kvazam, mabizim, and it goes weiter. Okay, so that is the parsha of the Nesach. Zok the Heilige Gemara, we're going to dash in this psuk beautifully. Can be the Chaymer. Tanu Rabbanan. It says Va'asizam Ishay Lashem. That's the pasuk that we just read. Yochol Kala Oila Ishay Meitanasach. You might think that anything that gets put on the mizbeach, that gets burnt on the mizbeach, requires a zachem, which would include afilu mincha. Talmud Loimer Oila. It says Oila, not a mincha. Shalom minayin. Talmud Loimer Zevach. Toida minayin. Talmud Loimer Oy Zevach the Oy Marba Toida. The Gemara is going to ask, why do you need Oy to be Marba Toida? Is a Toida not also considered a Zevach? That's going to be tomorrow. Which are all distinctly carbonas that are not voluntary. They're mandatory carbonas. Talmud Loimer lefale neder oy b'nedava, ba b'neder b'nedava ton nesachem. If it could come voluntarily, then you bring the sachem with it. Sheina ba b'neder b'nedava like a chatas and osham, meiser b'kar. Those are mandatory carbonas. Ein ton nesachem. So mashma lahoitzi eselu. So it's mashma to be mamayit those mandatory karbonis. Nu efsher oitzi es achoyvois habois machmas haregel beregel umayninu oilos riyah v'shal mechagiyah. Oilos riyah and shal mechagiyah are mandatory. You're mechuyev to bring them. V'lo yaro upon thy reka. So if efsher those shouldn't need to have nesachim. Talmud lover oy b'moyadechem. Anything that comes b'net and nedava, or even if it's a chiyev, if it's coming machmas to yom tov. Maybe also karbonis tibur of Yom Tov, special Yom Tov karbonis should all require nesachim. Ovis irei chatos hoy levon choyva beregel. Talmud loymar. This is later on in this same parsha where it goes through the individual shiurim that you need for the minchas nesachim. V'chisasa ben bakar. Now, why would it speak out ben bakar if we've already discussed bakar? Ben bakar bechlal hayav v'lama yotza. Why did the Torah once again mention ben bakar? Lahagish elov ma ben bakar muyuchid ba beneder v'nedava. Just like a ben bakar is a carbon that only comes beneder v'nedava. I've called ba beneder v'nedava to exclude the sir achatos that's brought by the tzibur. The pasuk says lasos rech nichach l'shem mina bakar mina tzoyin. Why does it need to say lasos rech mina bakar mina tzoyin? It already says at the beginning of the pasuk oila izavach. We already know from the beginning of Vayikra what you bring for an oila or a zavach. So why must the Torah tell us again mina bakar or mina tzoyin? Ma tamad leimer levishenemer oila shemeani afilu oila sa'if b'mashma. I would think that even an oila sa'if requires nesachim. Tamad leimer mina bakar or mina tzoyin. How do I know that you don't need to bring minchas nesachim for a carbon oila sa'oif? You know it from this extra word min habakar min hatzoyin. That's Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia Neimer einay tzarich. You don't need min habakar min hatzoyin to exclude oifis. You know why? Hareyu oimer zavach. It says zavach. Va'oif einay zavach. And oif is not called a zavach, and therefore we don't need a special pasuk min habakar min hatzoyin. Which means now we have extra pasuk. I'm sorry?
Does it have malika?
Is that, yeah. Oh, you're right. Rashi says exactly the b'malika u'v'lo b'zvicha. Exactly like what you said. Yep. Shkoich. I wasn't even aimer on that. You just told me that right now. Zog to Gemara. V'oif ein yizavach. Im kein ma tamad loymar mina bakar oy mina tzayin. We don't need it to be mamayit oif. So what is it for? Lefisha nemar. It says back in Vayikra, in the parsha of Karbanos, in the parsha of Oila, Adam ki Yaakov became Karban Hashem mina behema mina bakar u mina tzayin. Yochel, I would have thought ha'omer arei ale oila. If someone says arei ale oila, yavi mishneim. For the pasuk is mashal mina bakar u mina tzayin. If you say arei ale oila stami, you have to bring 2 karbanos. That's why in the parsha of Nesachim, the Torah was megala halachatas negeh to be mekabel to bring a karban oila. Tamadover mina bakar mina tzayin by Nesachim rotza echad maybe rotza shnai maybe mina bakar oy mina tzayin. Why would Rabbi Yonasan need a pasuk to teach us that? We know the algemen shita that Rabbi Yonasan has an olive shas. It says lo sachroish b'shor v'chamor yachtov. If it didn't say yachtov, I would have thought that you can't be chayrish with a shor even by itself. You can't be chayrish with a chamor even by itself. Only because it says yachtov do we know it means together. That's Rabbi Yonasan shita. So I bezoi in Parshas Vayikra when it says Adam ki Yaakov can karban l'shem min habakar min habehema min habakar min hatzayin, I already know it's one or the other because that is the default of how Rabbi Yonasan touches up every pasuk. So why do I need the pasuk of min habakar and min hatzayin in the Parshas Nesachim? Zakamar Itrich, according to Rabbi Yonasan, I still need it. This limud, you know why? I would have thought Hoyil bibal the Torah by Parshas Vayikra. It doesn't say mina bakar mina tzayin. It just says u mina tzayin. That vav is command the chsiv yachtav dami. The vav connects them, and I would fataych it that you need both together. So I would have thought that you would say arei alai oila, you're mechiv to bring bakar and tzayin. Kamash malon mina bakar oy mina tzayin. In our Parshas of Nesachim, that you only are mechayiv yourself for one or the other. Zogt Rabbi Yosy is a bewusste shita, who learns that by default it always means both together. The Yomar Afagav like Siv Yachtov, commanding Siv Yachtov Dami. So Oibazoi in the Parsha of Yikra when it says Mina Bakar Umina Tzayin, it means both. So how in the world will Rabbi Yosy know that when you say Arei Alei Oila, you don't have to bring both? He should need a pasuk. So how does he have the pasuk over here? To be memayit oif, he needs it to tell us that when you're makabel an oila, you don't have to bring 2 karbanos. Zokt Gemara, haksiv, it says im oila karbonoi min habakar ve'im min atzoin karbonoi. So vibalt, when the Torah gets into the details of the carbon oil in Parsha Vayikra, it goes one by one through each carbon. So clearly it says ve'imin atzayin karbonai if your oil was atzayin. So you see clearly your oil could only be atzayin. Good ha'ara. Oy bezoi, why did Rabbi Yonasan need a pasuk? It says ve'imin atzayin karbonai. Ve'idich itzrich. So kedaitach hamina hanem really b'mefarish. When do you say he only has to bring minat tzayin? What's the Torah talking about when it says minat tzayin? That's if he said harei alai 1 carbon of oil tzayin. That's what the Torah says minat tzayin karbonai. But what if a guy said avol b'stama? What if the guy said stam harei alai oil? Maybe that means both. Lai simitavayu kamash malon. You need minat bakar oil minat tzayin in the parsha of the Nesachim to tell you that if you're makabel harei alai oil, you're only mechuyev to bring 1 carbon. Gewaltig. I think we could stop here. Baruch Hashem, to finish daf Tzadik, and Beshem tomorrow we're going to learn Tzadik Aleph Tzeiul Lamad, but the Reish can learn. Geschmack